Thank you all for attending. I'd like to just welcome you to our meeting tonight, noting that we did start at 6 o'clock and that's where our meeting was opened. We are now back in open session from that time period. And the first thing I need as I scroll down here is approval of our minutes from our last meeting.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion or concerns about those? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. Next, I need approval of the agenda, but we are hopefully going to adjust 2 items from our consent agenda. We have 2 individuals that are going to speak to us specifically about things that are in the consent agenda, a one-time consideration for a trip and a fee waiver, and I'd like to put those immediately after our public comments, if that's okay with the board. And other than that, as written?
As written.
Okay. So with that change, I need approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve with the noted adjustments.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So at this time, we do have some public comments. So the way public comments work is I will call you forward. You may come up and sit at one of the tables, hopefully close to the microphone. These are recorded meetings. And tell us what you want to tell us. We'd like you to kind of manage it to about 3 minutes, if that would work in your concern. And other than that, we will deal with the concern after we hear from you. So Heidi, would you like to join us first?
Sure, I'd love to.
Thank you.
So, I wrote down some notes just so that you guys have in front of you what I'm talking about. So my son was supposed to be here tonight, but he's not because he's at basketball practice. But he and 2 of his friends have joined a team for LLS, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and they want to have, they are hoping to host a basketball camp, a basketball skills camp fundraiser for this cause. And it would be on Friday, February 24th for 3.5 hours. I've talked to Aaron May and he said that that would be fine with him if they use the intermediate school because that was available, the intermediate school gym. We're gonna call the event Shoot for the Cure. All proceeds go to LLS. It'll take place from 9 to 12:30. I'll be there with 2 other adults to collect the money. Parents can come in and drop off their kids and sign a waiver. The kids will be escorted to the gym by Owen, or by the parent chaperones, and then they'll be chaperoned by Owen, Drew, and Brady. We have a schedule that'll be for 1 hour for each group, so 9 to 10, first and second grade, 10:15 to 11:15, the 3rd and 4th graders, and then 11:30 to 12:30, the 5th and 6th graders. Each group will work on their skills for an hour, leave when they're done. I think that the reason I'm here is just to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with this, and that if there is an insurance issue, we thought, well, if parents can come in with their kids when they drop them off, they could sign a waiver. I have a copy of a waiver that they could sign. I don't know if there's a waiver that's used in this kind of situation. So I guess that's part of my question, like, is everyone comfortable with signing a waiver?
To take care of this?
Yeah, so the reason that this is on the agenda
Yeah.
is they're asking for a facility use exemption, otherwise there's a charge to use the gym. And
Oh, is that what, because
so
I
what-
didn't
So what you're
actually
here
know
for is
why.
actually to have that waiver, that exempted, so that
Okay.
we would allow you to use the facility without cost.
Okay,
And then what we would do is work with you on all the other pieces, once we know what that is. So this is
Okay.
really kind of a piece that we'll work with you as far as the utilization of the gym, but I think part of what your request was to use it without cost. So I know, talking to Aaron Mayer and Brian Borowski, they're supportive of this, so they've recommended that, but it doesn't, that needs action through the board.
okay, thank you.
And so in your packets that you see at your seats and in your board book, we have it printed out of kind of what the request is, and then some follow-up questions that I had with regards to some of the details, which you've already covered.
I did.
And I think you have them also here laid out in your sheet with some things with the cost, kind of how you're gonna organize it, who are the adults gonna be there.
Yep.
Those are some of just the initial pieces, since this request is also coming through some of our students. We do
Yep.
need to have an adult who's responsible as well,
Okay.
and then we can work through any of the other aspects kind of offline here. But I think the piece that the board needs to have action on is with regards to the fee exemption.
All right. I think that's all we need from you.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
is this waiver, so I have a copy of a waiver, but I don't know if,
If you want to just give it to Steve,
Okay.
and then we can take it from there, and then what we'll do is after tonight, we'll have probably someone either from the business office or the athletic department kind of work with you.
okay. So the date is the 24th of February because the kids have off of school that day. So I apologize for like a tight deadline.
It's all right, it's perfect.
okay.
It's-
Working with the junior in high school.
It's on the
You
agenda
know.
tonight, so you're good.
It's quick.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And the next request, kind of again, an unusual request, but exciting, comes from Drew.
Yeah.
So if you would like to join us and tell us about your concern.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Drew Renier. I'm a senior student athlete at Waunakee High School. I'm coming forward today to ask you, the school board, to grant me permission to participate at the Arcadia Invitational Track Meet in Arcadia, California, representing Waunakee High School. I've worked hard to become an elite high school track and field athlete at the national level, and I'm proud to be able to bring recognition to Waunakee High School through my state title and national accolades. My dedication to the sport and school is seen through my rigorous schedule and my 4.0 GPA. Not only is this a great opportunity for me to showcase my abilities and represent, it is also a personal dream come true for my mom. My mom, who was raised in Southern California, competed in this elite event when she was in high school. Along with that, her family has never seen me compete live. This would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them to watch me race and fulfill a lifelong dream. I understand that this is a big responsibility, and I assure you that I am fully committed to representing Waunakee High School in the best possible manner. My parents and I are willing to pay all costs and take any necessary parental and school responsibilities throughout the entire trip. I hope that you consider this request and grant me the opportunity to participate at the Arcadia Invitational on April 8th. Thanks again for your time and consideration.
Yeah, let me add a little bit of context. The part of the reason this came to the board is it's a very unique request. It's congratulations for being invited to this and being part of it, and I think what we all want to do is support you. So part of what it is wanting to make sure that this was all following what our policies were. I know that Mr. May has looked into WIAA and some of those aspects, so that from my understanding is you will be representing your school at the meet. So that's part of what why this comes here. Because our policy states that if you're going to travel, you travel to the adjacent states. This is something I would view as an exception and a very appropriate exception. And also our policy states that you'd be traveling with a paid coach. So we're not sending a coach with Drew. His parents are taking on that responsibility. And as he's articulated, that's part of what his request is. So our recommendation as we look at this would be to support this, but I wanted to bring it forward here so that this was all in line with and transparent with regards to anything for Drew, his family, and also for WIAA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Very cool. So both of these items are in our consent agenda, but I would like to have a motion now while the participants are here before they leave and they don't have to wait till 9 or 10 o'clock. So if there would be somebody who would make a motion.
I'll make a
And we
motion.
can take them both together.
Make a motion to accept both.
Second. Any other questions that anybody has? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Great, thank you both for bringing that forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
You don't have to stay.
that's exciting. No, you don't have to stay. You may,
I'm
if
right
you
behind
like.
Brian said,
Thank you.
remember?
And I would like to welcome, we have a Boy Scout here tonight. Caleb Miller is just kind of viewing the process of what a school board is like. So I'd like to welcome you, Caleb. Moving forward to our student reports, do we have any of our students here? Is Caden or Izzy
I
here?
don't see, did we hear from them at all? Rebecca?
Izzy said she would have meant it, but I thought Kaden was going to, but I haven't heard from him at all.
If he comes in, we'll
Okay.
bump him in.
All right.
Then we'll move to our teacher report, and we have three lovely ladies there, Jill, Amy, Mel. Come
They
on
get to go
forward.
first.
What?
They go first.
They go first.
All right.
Thank you for attending.
Absolutely.
You going first, Amy?
Okay, I guess
Yeah.
I'll go. I'm Amy. I teach at the intermediate school. I'm the ed tech specialist there.
I'm Mel Burton. I'm the art teacher at the intermediate school.
Jill Stotts, fifth grade at the intermediate.
So we just have some positives and some things just to make you guys aware of. One positive that I wanted to share is there's kind of there's this grassroots wellness support group that's being started in the district. It's for staff members, and I just want to let you know about that that's something that is starting in our district. And also another thing is, you guys are fully aware of this, I'm sure, is the sub shortage. Like, we have a lot of staff members who are working hard to cover for each other. And if there's anyone watching out there that would like to be a guest teacher, please come to Bethel and apply, because we would love for more guest teachers to come and be subs in our buildings. So that continues to be an issue, but we're really proud of how we help each other out. So that's my two things.
All right, and the Waunakee Teachers Association does look forward to being a part of the hiring process for the Waunakee School District Superintendent in the future. We also hope to help and be a part of engaging the community in that process.
Heritage reported that they really appreciated the walkthrough with the architect that they had recently, and just coming from the intermediate building and how we were able to be involved in that process and watching that happen at Heritage. There's just a lot of positive comments that are coming from that. The high school reports that they have some visitors from France, 3 students, and so they're going to be touring around. They're staying with some high school parents, and they're going to be going to classes in the next few weeks and kind of hanging out and talking about their culture and taking an interest in ours. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions that anybody has for our ladies? Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for coming. Moving on to board reports. We have had a number of things happen in the last month, including our state school board convention. So who would like to start reporting out on what has gone on in the last month?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for the curriculum presentation that we had the end of the month. I thought that was a really great way to see what the English Language Arts Department was doing, and world language and art and business and marketing. It's just amazing to me how many offerings there are out there and the diversity and the depth that our school district provides. So that was, thanks for the teachers for providing that for us.
Thank you, Judy.
I participated in the state convention for school board members this past month with several other members, and had the opportunity to represent our school district as a delegate. So that was really interesting to get a better understanding of what the needs are of other school districts and to kind of learn through that process. So that was really good, and it was great to participate in some other learning opportunities with Wisconsin Reads, and that one stood out to me the most, and some other opportunities to kind of network with one another, and so I appreciate that opportunity to participate in that convention.
Thank you.
Yes, likewise, I appreciate the district providing the opportunity to go to WASB. A lot of terrific ideas, a chance to network, as I said, and some real outstanding sessions, opportunity to hear a little bit about superintendent searches, that was helpful to just kind of scratch the surface and get some understanding. I guess in addition to that, I have attended a summit on early literacy and a town hall on DEI. The town hall meeting featured Sun Prairie with their board president and superintendent, and kind of went through their process of how they came up with their DEI platform, or DEIJ is how they're referring to it, with the term justice being part of the acronym now. And the summit was a discussion on early literacy by Mark Seidenberg, a neurologist from the University of Wisconsin, Donna Hetchmanek, a Wisconsin teacher, and she has a blog or website, What I Should Have Learned About Reading in College, and Emily Hanford, educational reporter.
Thank you, Mark. I also had the opportunity to attend all 3 days of the state convention. The focus or what I kind of gleaned away from it is, one, I did spend quite a bit of time in attending a session on a superintendent search, as well as just seeking out other board members and districts and chatting about the process that they have gone through, districts that have been through this within the last 3 to 5 years. Other sessions that I attended, a lot on new legislation that might be coming through school law. One that particularly stood out to me was putting reading into practice. It really sparked something in me to really think about how we approach literacy. And so I attended also the summit that Mark referenced. I listened to a podcast, Sold a Story, by Emily Hanford. Really have spent some time thinking about and kind of reacquainting myself on how literacy is taught. Being a trained math teacher, it's not something that is in my wheelhouse, and I felt I needed to kind of educate myself to even be able to ask the right questions about literacy. So I'm trying to build my background up in that regard. So anyway, great time to network always. It just felt good to be back fully in person after our last couple of years of not being in person. So it was a lovely week. So thank you to the district. Any other reports that anybody has? Moving on, we do have board and superintendent evaluations. I just want to, remind everybody to kind of look through that. Remember, the board evaluation is done by school perceptions. It's a code you put in, you get online. If you've lost your code, Rebecca can probably help you out. Doesn't take a great deal of time. You do have to submit your name so we know who has or has not. Randy gave us a good update tonight about some of the work on his evaluation, for us completing his evaluation, and some of the priorities. So I think the final deadline, as I see here, is March 17th. All in to Rebecca, please. Thank you. Moving forward, we are looking at timeline. We've done that. The community engagement.
Yep, I'll take that.
Yeah, review and provide feedback for the
Yep.
community engagement.
I'm going to ask Lisa Jondal to come forward. She's our Director of Student Services. One of the things that we have articulated in our board priorities this year is to continue to take a look at student mental health and social emotional learning. One of the things that we came up with as we talked about our goals last spring was wanting to do a community engagement session. Certainly, that didn't happen this fall with all the referendum activities, but we then scheduled this out to March 6th. So what you find in your packet is an outline of our draft agenda. I've asked each of the board members to kind of give us a list of people that you'd like us to purposely and specifically invite. So if you just get those to Rebecca, and then we'll also open it up to the general public and all of our parents. But I've asked Lisa just to step forward for a few minutes just to kind of give an overview of what her and her team have envisioned for this night, and also to solicit your feedback if there's some things that you want us to think about between now and delivering this on March 6th. So Lisa, I'll let you kind of touch base on kind of what that looks like, and then open it up for any questions.
Great. Thank you. Well, we're excited for this opportunity because we believe that true engagement is, of course, about helping to educate and learn. And what a better way to do that than in a way that feels like the classroom. That's alive, that's well, that actually involves interaction instead of kind of this large-scale presentation, real passive approach. So the goal would be, as Randy mentioned, you can see in the agenda, to start kind of in a large group, and then to break off into 3 separate breakout rooms. A little bit like we did the curriculum presentations the other evening. There'll be 2 to 3 members of the district SEL team, so that is inclusive of elementary and intermediate classroom teachers, high school social worker, a specialist, and an encore teacher. So there will be like 2 people in one breakout room doing a presentation on like the Castle standards, for example. That's kind of the overview. And then they would walk through some sort of interactive presentation about how this would actually play out in a classroom. So that as members of the audience, you would get a chance to kind of participate in that. I think it's gonna go really quickly. It's gonna be alive. It's going to be a lot of chatter. And then you'll move on to the next space. So no matter where you start, you'll hit all 3 of those engagement sessions. So the first one would be a Castle, more of an overview. The second one would be community circles and advisory inside of the developmental designs framework. You've heard a little bit about that. Some of you actually attended the training. And so this would be how that plays out in a community circle at the elementary, and then in advisories from intermediate and to the secondary level. And then the third strand would be 2 of the Castle standards that were a focus as a thread throughout this entire year, which are self-management and self-awareness. So it's kind of, if you think about like a big funnel, it's like general, application, and then kind of tied to like one of those core competencies. So the thread that would go across is how these standards and concepts are used across all the grade levels. So you kind of get a flavor. As I mentioned, it would be participation and active engagement in a lot of the learning strategies that are used. And then the ultimate goal would be that everybody walks away with a really practical understanding of how SEL is utilized in the classrooms in our current schools. Did I miss
Nope.
any, or other
And then
questions?
we have a kind of an evaluation piece at the end that'll give us some feedback. So.
Okay,
Yep.
yes, that's right.
So that's kind of the overview of what we're looking at. One of the pieces that we're going to move forward with here, probably starting tomorrow, is starting to then advertise this out. I've had a little bit of feedback. You've seen a couple of our draft letters that we've put together to kind of simplify those down with some of the feedback I received. So we're open right now to any thoughts that you have, either on the communication piece or also on any of the proposal that Lisa is laying out there.
Thank you for putting this together. I think it's awesome that you're giving examples of what it would look like in a classroom. And I would just, I think it's great we're putting together like a marketing campaign to get people to come, because I would encourage parents and families to attend, because this is a really great way to get a better understanding of what's happening in schools, to answer some questions, and to interact with, other parents. So I think thank you for putting this on and for taking so much time to put thought into it. So thank you.
Lisa, what will our role be? Will we just be part of the groups, or do you want to use us in any other way, or?
Oh, well, I didn't know that was an option. I think in the overview, it would be nice just to introduce yourselves as, you know, the board, and when we do a welcome, I envisioned it would maybe be Randy and myself, and probably one or a couple of you just, you know, saying welcome and thanks for being here, and
Okay,
here's what SEL is, and this
Yeah.
is the goal of our evening together.
yeah.
And then kind of the same in a closure, you know, thanks for being here, it means a lot to the board. And then if you have additional questions, we may have like a QR code or some way to scan if people have lingering items that they'd like to discuss or want some follow-up on after the engagement session.
So as you advertise it, probably like Facebook or social media, however you advertise it out, will there be a link that they register so you are aware of who's coming? That will all be easy to follow and figure out, and Annie's got that, she's
Annie's-
shaking her
yep,
head, she's got that,
all
she's
under
got
control.
it.
We also have interpretation and translation services available, so we'll know and try to kind of keep a group together so Angie can attend and make sure that our presentations are accessible.
Yeah.
And then we know ahead of time how many to plan for too.
We're doing an RSVP, so we can get an idea of how many people would be there.
Yeah.
So that if it, I mean, ideally, I'd love to get, as Katie said, a number of people that we then have to kind of figure out how we're gonna manage that. Because we're looking to do it at in one of the villages or neighborhoods over at the intermediate school. And if we need to expand, we have the ability to do that.
Thank you, Lisa. And I would just like to piggyback on what Katie said, and to anybody watching tonight live or in the future watching, to really think about this opportunity. When you look at social emotional learning, it is such a framework to build a student's identity and their, you know, inclusiveness and safe space and all of those other components, and it just adds to the curriculum. And it's a really important topic and a really important component to our curriculum. So thank you for doing that, and please consider attending.
We are excited about the opportunity just to show the great work that's happening in our classrooms every day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
I'll be back.
All right. Next is,
Could I ask a question on the letters that are going out, and it says RSVP is required, and then there's a sign up genius, is that a link? Or is
that
there,
will be a link.
or is there a way to have or an email address or something else if people don't know what the sign up genius is? Okay.
Yeah, we'll add some of those pieces in it. I think some of the feedback we received was to simplify some of our communication. So
Okay.
we'll provide some options there if somebody's not comfortable with the sign-up to your news piece. We're really just looking at kind of trying to get an idea of numbers. That's
Good,
really what our
good.
biggest concern is.
Thank you. Moving along to, a few of us did attend a superintendent search process at the state board convention. But to kind of put everybody on the same page and include everybody in the loop, I've asked Brian if he would just kind of, and he spent not only that session, but time in the booths with search firms to help identify if that's the route we want to go. Anyway, I'd like Brian to maybe walk us through the process or an example of the process to begin our discussion of the superintendent search.
Thanks, Joan. The only thing I guess I would add is, in addition to kind of the opportunity to listen to the session at the convention and talk with some of the vendors, I did also have an opportunity to talk with some other schools that have recently, gone through this in the last couple of years. There's also a chance to review a number of websites for different districts who are publicizing their process. And then I had a conversation with John Bales, who is the leader of the School Superintendents Association. And so talking a little bit about what is typically happening out in, different schools, and what do superintendents kind of expect to see as they're going through the process. And so what I'll share with you a little bit is the process is pretty similar in most schools. And then when I get towards the end, I kind of break out for you a little bit of whether you go the route of a search firm or not a search firm, what are some of the benefits, what are some of the things they provide, pros and cons. Typically, the way the process starts is, in this, again, for us, looking to have a hire in January or shortly thereafter. You're probably going to start late summer or in September to gather feedback from important stakeholders. And so, stakeholders, you around the table here as board members, your staff as a whole, and your community. And community is purposely general. It's not just your parents or guardians, it is your community, because they all have a part in interacting with your school. And typically you're doing that in a couple different ways. You're offering opportunities to complete and participate in surveys, and you're also facilitating, or someone is facilitating, forums or listening sessions for individuals to come, attend, and share things that they want to see, things that they want to see continued or want to see changed. That feedback will help develop, as I mentioned, what they call the candidate profile. And then that profile is used as part of the posting process, where you put out the position for, to advertise it. And that's really an October, November timeframe. And that really results in what, kind of is called passive recruiting, right? You put the information out, people that come to it, and maybe ask for more information, maybe they put their name in, etc. The other part of the process is really active recruiting. And active recruiting is where you're seeking out people that fit the profile that you've developed. And I'll circle back to that in a little bit. The next process is really screening. And the screening process is typically a board level responsibility. So the board uses the profile that's been developed, and they are doing a couple things. Either they're looking at all of the candidates, or again, and this is one I don't have another way to get it. If you do involve a search firm, typically your search firm helps narrow that list down for you. To what you've specified. Do you want to see all the candidates? Do you want to see half the candidates? Do you want to see 7? That's really kind of set by what your preference and interest is. And then in the December range, you really have a multi-step interview process. The typical first step is that you're bringing in your first preliminary slate of candidates to interview with your board. And then the board is going to take that preliminary list of candidates down to your finalists. And that once you have finalists, it's called lots of different things, but usually what that's going to involve is your finalists come into the district, and they're going to be interviewing or presenting or interacting with stakeholder groups. And so there's going to be typically a multi-part process. There's a community process. They're presenting to the community, or there's an interview room, if you would, that they're presenting to a larger group. There's a staff group that they're interacting with or presenting to. And then feedback is being given from those groups to the board for another round, a final interview, if you will, where the board is then going to take that list of finalists and make a decision of who meets the criteria from the profile, who's gotten the feedback that you want to hear from your different stakeholders, and who has impressed you with their vision for leadership. And then, in that month of December, we're negotiating a contract, and then hopefully you're circling back in January with acceptance and an announcement for the next superintendent. As I said before, talking about the search firm a little bit, it is done both ways. what I would say, the feedback that I'd been given from those different groups, you know, John Bales, the search firms themselves, and some of the area schools, is that you get to a district of our size, it's very typical, more typical to have a search firm involved in the process. You know, and they're doing some of the activities, like they're facilitating and developing your profile. They are an independent ear, if you would, to listen to the feedback that stakeholder groups are going to provide to you. They're going to look at survey information, verbal feedback, those kinds of things, with a probably more of an unbiased view, because they are external. You know, they're going to hear from you. What do we want to see? You know, what are we thinking we have had? They're going to hear from community groups. They're going to hear from staff, and they're going to take and put that down into a profile that is realistic. Because it's very possible, as you know, I heard a few times, the profile could end up looking like someone that is more theoretical than realistic, right? And so, I mean, they use different words, and so it's important. What are the things that are most important to everyone involved? You know, as I mentioned before, the search firm is also going to be, or I didn't mention before, would be involved in the recruiting process. And this is, I think, where you start to see a reason many school districts tend to go this route, is I mentioned the active recruiting process. Not every superintendent that has a position wants it to be known that they're open to a new position. You know, there's a political expense to making people aware that you're looking to leave your current job. And so search firms are typically highly connected. Often they're involve retired superintendents or active superintendents that have these relationships, that they are more aware of who is amenable to another position, who might be open to considering another position, and who's doing work that is very similar to the work that a profile is looking for. And so, you know, they're going to be very helpful in that regard. As I mentioned a little bit in the screening, you can choose to have that search firm. Some districts have that search firm do some of the pre-screening process. Some boards prefer to see it all, right? They want to see everything, and that's really a question of the expertise you feel you have and the time you feel you have, and whether you want to have it in hand or you want a little assistance with that. And then when you get into the interview process, they're typically going to serve a role kind of like the role that I would serve in many of our district interviews. They help facilitate the interview room a little bit. When we get into having multiple stakeholder areas, they're the person that is facilitating the community stakeholder interview room. They're gathering feedback and then reporting it out. They're doing the same with a staff process. And so that, again, you've got a level of independence, but you've also got a level of experience because it's something that they're doing very frequently in the arena of superintendents. And I guess, as I had mentioned before, probably the biggest reasons that most folks districts tend to go towards this route is just the independence of a search firm. The fact they're coming to you as opposed to being ingrained in what we have done or would like to do. And I would say that they're able to bring probably that active recruiter would be probably the biggest reasons folks would go that route. And the other part I would say is that I heard from multiple different sources in this, they're going to provide the level of service that you seek and define in your request for a proposal. And so depending on what you want them to do or how much you would like them to do, we would identify that as we'd prepare a proposal for them, and then we would ask them to present back to us, much like you've done as you've hired your contractors, right? You're typically going to interview a search firm or search firms to see who fits your vision best. And, you know, your first step is you ask for the proposals, you review them as a board, determine who you want to meet, if you would, and then you go from there. When we talk about, you know, the cons, there really is only one, at least that I was given as feedback, and that is it's an additional cost. You know, as a district of our size, and depending how involved you want them and how many steps you want them to perform, you're looking at a cost, you know, somewhere between 15 and 30,000. And you're going to determine, you're going to know that up front based on the proposals that they present to you, and how they go from there.
Is that a percentage of the salary?
It typically is not. It's typically almost
Flat
like a
fee?
per, you know, per activity, or, you know, per step costing.
Thank you, Brian. So, my purpose tonight of asking Brian to kind of report out this process is so everyone kind of had the timeline and that option of hiring a search firm or not. When talking to Brian and talking to the firms, I don't feel we have to make a decision tonight whether we go with a search firm or not. I just wanted everybody aware that that is a possible typical procedure that many districts our size would use. If you want time to think about it, we could revisit it next month. You know, there's definitely a cost, but I think he pointed out a lot of components that, you know, we might really use that search firm wisely to help us. So, you know, I don't know if anybody wants to share where they kind of are right now with the process. It's beginning, as Brian and I kind of talked about it, we feel that if we're gonna do the search firm, we probably wanna move on that in April or May, get a request for proposal put together. We could do some of that work through our HR committee. The request for proposal, working with Brian, bringing it back here for approval. If you wanna do the whole process as a whole board, we can have it as an agenda item monthly. You know, I guess I just would like to, you know, involve people to the extent they want to be involved, and to, you know, utilize the whole board or committee work to wherever, you know, we as a group want to be.
Randy, when do you retire? What's your last day or month?
June 30th.
As soon as the
2024.
policies are done.
Yeah.
As soon as the
Yeah,
policies
that's
are
right.
done?
Policies gotta be finished.
That's right, yeah, we're gonna drag it out.
No,
June
sorry.
30th, 2024.
Yeah. So the hiring then would be, what you're suggesting is hiring in January?
Yeah, I mean, typically, if you talk about the hiring season for superintendents for like a June or July
Okay,
one
so
start.
they would start.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we would hire that individual, and again,
Okay.
if they're currently a superintendent, or they currently have a school position, which is obviously highly likely, you know, that gives them an opportunity to provide their notice, and work out of their contract in their current district, and get into position to be able to start on July 1. And also potentially have, you know, a nice transition in terms of opportunities to connect with Randy, to connect with the district as a whole, so that you know, they're not just jumping into the deep end on July 1. They've had a chance to get to know the many stakeholders and district as a whole gradually.
Yeah, Jack, I think when I was hired in February, somewhere in that neighborhood, and then it started July 1.
What we found out at WASB is that January through March is a heavy recruiting period. And if we can move before then, we should have a stronger pool.
So you're, if I'm just laying this out in my head, you're looking at October is when you do the soft
Yeah, you kind of
So
put
you
your,
put the-
typically put your postings out, yep.
posting out in October, and then your search firm is doing some aggressive polling pulling people in.
Yeah, tapping folks on the shoulder and doing things of that nature.
In that November, December.
Probably similar time to when the posting would come out, or even in advance of. You know, they're gonna do some of that, hey, keep an eye out for this coming up, have you thought about this? You know, that's kind of where the relationship aspect comes in, that they'll give some folks heads up. I mean, everyone is really, you know, not going out to look for someone in that September range, because if they're working in the school, I mean, we're all deep into getting the school year started at that time, right? But we get into October, November, it gives folks a chance to let the dust settle a little bit and kind of put their materials together and go from there.
But I think a really important part of the process is creating that profile, involving the community and the staff. And, you know, I think that needs to be done probably starting late spring, summer, to
Yeah.
build up to that posting in October. So,
Understood.
you know, I think our first decision is, do we want to use a search firm or not? And again, we don't have to make that decision tonight, we can think about that. But I think by March, we should make that decision. And then how do we want to handle the request for proposal, work with Brian, maybe with Steve, and put that together.
Yeah, and I guess I'd just like to add from what we heard, one of the things that appeals to me besides what we've shared about the search firm is also the work it will entail for the board to do the surveys, to lead the forums, and then to analyze the data. I don't know how much time,
Yeah.
as a board, we have to do that stuff. Whereas it'll be much thorough work if we were to have a firm to help us.
And more than time is the expertise
Expertise.
to do that work.
One of the things, sorry, did
Go ahead.
it sounds like maybe Brian and Joan, maybe you talked to some of our peers that went through a similar process over the last couple of years. Do we have an idea of a typical school our size? You had mentioned it a couple times. They use, what are some examples of some school districts that you talked to that may or may not have used a search firm, or, you know, what was their process?
In general, I would say that, typically the kind of the process that I laid out is very typical.
Okay.
Some of the districts that, in our area that have very recently hired a superintendent, DeForest in 2022, Stoughton in 2022, Madison in 2020, Verona in 2021, Baraboo in 2021, McFarland in 2022, Lake Geneva in 2022, Germantown in 2022, Franklin in 2022, Middleton Cross Plains
COVID-related?
2019, Oregon in 2019, and so it's been very active.
Sure. And of the majority of those districts, did they utilize a search firm? Do we know
I
that?
believe that all of them did
All
except
of
for
them did.
one.
Okay.
DeForest did not.
Okay,
DeForest went through a different internal process
okay,
and did hire their person.
okay.
And so it is, again, this, I tried to focus just on peer districts here, and so 25% of the superintendents were brand new last year. So there's a lot of hiring that occurred in recent years.
Thank you.
So should we just put this on the agenda for next month? I don't feel we need, we're way ahead of, not way ahead, but we are ahead of the game, and that gives everybody an opportunity to think about it, and, maybe you want to reach out to some of our neighboring districts and ask questions. Thank you, Brian.
I guess one of the things I'd like to understand is the search firms, the success. They
Oh.
helped hire that superintendent. What's the community and school feedback, right?
Well, and I think that is one aspect you can ask them to touch on within a request for proposal. What I would say is that some search firms do offer a guarantee of some kind. Like if it doesn't work and this person leaves and within a defined period of time, they'll repeat the process. Often, they'll also offer the opportunity to help that not occur, right, is that they'll help facilitate a process with a new superintendent and a board of goal setting. What does success need to look like? What are you gonna measure it on? What are they looking for? And they'll offer that as well. And that's something, if you want, you can ask, we can ask for that request for proposal, right? We can put that in there, if that's important to us.
And it sounds like they provide a range of services, so while all those districts may have used a search firm, some may have just used it for that active recruiting part, or some may have used it for the facilitate surveys, or analyze data, or whatever, so
For
that
sure.
would be something too that we would probably need to decide if we were to go that route, what amount of involvement we want from them.
I know one of the questions that one of you asked me was kind of, what does it mean when you use a search firm? Does that mean you're looking for somebody from out of state? I think every time you put it online, it's a national search. But really what you can define kind of what you're looking for, but I think the majority of you people that are gonna be most interested are gonna be your Wisconsin folks. They're looking already. I mean, they know that it's gonna be open, and people are looking and watching and seeing and evaluating, is this where I wanna be? So I think that process has already started, and now it's just a matter of making some of those pieces, but you get to define kind of your scope of that. So I think that's a piece to at least consider, that it's not, just because it's a firm, you kind of think of a headhunter group for kind of in the corporate world. It doesn't have to mean that you're looking for people across the country. You're looking for people then, particularly as you look at nuances of how states are operating, you're probably going to get a significant pool out of Wisconsin.
Any other questions for Brian or at this point? So we'll revisit next month, Brian, and go from there. Thank you. Moving on to committee reports, starting with co-curricular.
Yeah, we met on January 12th, and to get a fall 22 program update, like we do usually 3 or 4 times a year. Hear about the great things that our athletes accomplished and our students accomplished in all activities over the fall. And it never disappoints to hear the great stuff that they've done, the participation numbers, and the academics, level of academics that they're performing at. So it's always great to hear. We talked a little bit about the coaches' meetings and evaluations. All fall coaches' evaluations have been completed, and follow-up meetings are scheduled. The couple of things we wanted to bring forward just to touch on, no action items or anything like that. We had a discussion regarding strength and conditioning coordinator positions. We've heard over the last couple of years regarding how busy the weight room is, and really we have a couple people doing a lot of the work. And that's probably not gonna last forever, but, the weight room is very important, to our development of our students, but it's also important in terms of liability and, insurance and that kind of stuff, making sure we have the qualified people that we have overseeing the weight rooms, and the strength and conditioning to get the best out of our students and, to help them achieve their individual goals. So, that will be, something that will be ongoing, and I'm sure will be presented in front of a budget committee to sort of look at numbers to see how we can maybe move forward with strength and conditioning coordinator in the future. I don't know, Aaron or Randy, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you kind of hit the highlights there. Anything to add in?
So you touched on the biggest thing, the increase in the number of student athletes and the utilization of that really is calling for that to be a specific position in and of itself. They're not just laying it on PE teacher or a coach as it's been.
Right.
Right.
That's just kind of looking at, when you look at facilities, I mean, that's one of our areas for facility growth, and as we kind of have projects moving forward, that's gonna be a piece we have to continue to look at, because there's definitely that's a limiting factor right now with space. I mean, you start looking at track teams that have 120 some kids in it, and trying to put them into, they just don't fit in the space. So how do we kind of plan for that for the future, and then how do you have appropriate staffing to support that?
And the last thing we asked Randy sort of for an update on, he had met with, the initial meeting with the booster clubs, just to sort of ask them questions, answer any questions at this point. I don't know, Randy, if you want to.
Yeah, I think we had every sport represented. I appreciate our team that was helping with that, and then also everybody who took part. We have another meeting scheduled for mid-March, which will be much more kind of a working session with them. The first one was really informational around Title IX. And then we'll have a final meeting for the year in May. What I anticipate kind of coming out of that as kind of an end goal is a co-curricular booster club handbook that can not only address some of the Title IX pieces, but some of the financial pieces that we've discussed here for years, as far as kind of the transparency pieces there, and then also just trying to look at all of the different policies, regulations, best practices that we can include in there. I've asked Annie to be kind of a communications point for that, to help kind of look for some samples and examples, and we're already started down that road. So, yeah, but our next meeting's in March with that team.
Okay. Yep, and that sort of wrapped up co-curriculars, and we don't have a meeting, but I'm sure we'll have one, probably a little bit of a announcement or presentation in April, just to cover the winter sports, so.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you.
All right.
Next, the DEI committee.
We met 123. We don't have any actionable items. We did complete our final review of our area for DEI recommendations. Want to, again, thank you all for the work you're doing in your committees, and if you're finished, if you could submit them, that'd be helpful, and if you're not quite finished, if you can have them by April 1st, that would be most helpful, so we can put them together and make a report to the board. We had an update on the student conference that's scheduled for March. Randy mentioned that already in closed session for the sake of the board, so there's really, if you want more information on what happened, you can look at our minutes, but those are the two key areas we focused on. Oh, one last thing is, we do have a MSAN conference coming up on April 20th and 21st. That's the Minority Student Achievement Network. Students from around Dane County, as well as representatives from the staffs around the county, present different aspects of achievement within their schools, different programs and that sort of thing. If you're interested, I'd really encourage you, even just one of those 2 days. If you want to go to both days, that's worthwhile, but contact Tim Shell and he'll help accommodate you with the registration. We'll self-register here.
If I can just add something, Mark, you brought up about the Visioning Summit for the high school students. I did talk about it in closed session as part of my eval with the board. But I think since you brought it up here, I'd like to just to take a second to kind of talk a little bit about it. So the whole concept of that is to really look at how can we utilize the power of our students to really think about how they can improve their school. So there's going to be a keynote speaker, Jason Fields, who's the executive director for MADRAP, Madison Regional Economic Partnership, coming from kind of the business perspective of looking at kind of why this works and why creating great cultures and great places to work and live and be in school is important. And then also having our students then being facilitated by some of our staff as far as processes to get their voice heard and get their perspectives forward. And the outcome of that is going to be focused on what are some things that they see as potential actionable items that then they can plan for the future to make their school a better place. That's really the whole concept of it. It's kind of a launch pad to kind of a planning process with students. Many of the kids that are going to be participating in that are going to be the freshmen through juniors who are going to be here next year. So we have some continuation of that work. So that's a little bit of the update. It's on March 17th. It's the day that we have parent-teacher conferences. The kids actually, with some feedback from a focus group to get an understanding of when's a good time to hold this. Holding it during the school day, kids don't want to miss class. Holding it in the evening, there's a lot of activities you're competing on. So they chose to try to see how it would work doing it on a day when there's no school, which is a Friday. So it'll be a Friday morning.
8:30 to 12.
8:30 to 12.
15, I think. And again, if any board members can attend it, even a part of it, that'd be great for you to be there and see what's going on. And a big thank you to Tim Shell and Michelle McGrath and our high school social workers for the work they've been doing behind this, as well as the students.
Sure, yeah, and I think they're kind of looking at kind of the attendance piece to make sure that we don't overwhelm it with adults, so we'll get some feedback back to you on that, because I know that we want to hear from the kids. Jeff?
Are we restricting the number of students that can come, or anybody who wants to come?
I think it's open to everybody. I know it's been advertised in the newsletters. I mean, I think there's been some conversations about even kind of like with the leaders. It was kind of led by our student services team, who then asked the advisors for some students who would like to kind of be on an advisory role. So there was 5 or 6 kids that stepped forward, and they used them as more of a sounding board. And then it's been kind of planned from there. But yeah, it's open to everybody.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, curriculum committee.
So we have 2 items that we are looking for approval on or decision on. And the first is moving the computational thinking for math to a math credit from an elective credit. And Tim can kind of explain the background behind that proposal.
Thank you, Katie. So if you remember, not from our most recent set of curriculum presentations, but from the set back in November, Erin Paval, who is our computer science instructor at the high school, walked us through our sequence of courses in computer science. The first course in that sequence is computational thinking, a course that really doesn't involve any coding, but is much more based on problem solving, codes, other mathematical concepts. And so we brought that course in many, many years ago, and it has always been in our book as an elective course. Since that occurred, and it's a semester-length course, since that occurred, DPI has provided clearer guidance on what competencies need to be covered in a computer science course for it to be eligible for mathematics credit. And we have added additional semester-length courses in mathematics. So our Intro to Statistics course, our Discrete Mathematics course. So it's more feasible now for a student to stack the semester of computational thinking with one of these other semester courses for a full credit. As a result, the math department's requesting that we award mathematics credit for the computational thinking course. Now, most of the students who take computational thinking are actually taking lots of other math courses. It's probably not, in general, going to be something that will be the last half credit to get a student 2-3 credits, which is our math credit requirement. It's also important to understand that there are going to be certain entities that may not recognize computational thinking as a math credit. So there may be some universities that don't for admissions purposes. It may not count for NCAA. So these are advising decisions that our counselors would navigate with students who are interested in doing this. But the course does match the DPI criteria. It's a local control piece. After you make a decision, it doesn't require any further review by DPI, but it is a board decision.
And there's a little discussion about combining that with statistics and discrete mathematics for
Not combining it as a course, but, you know, for example, Brian, if you were a student at the high school, you could take the 1 semester course of computational thinking, you could take a 1 semester course of discrete mathematics. They combine for 2 semesters, which would be a full math credit.
Will the counselors, you think, be equipped with enough knowledge to know where it's
Counselors
where
are
they're
pretty
going?
familiar with, well, I should say, counselors are very familiar with what does and doesn't count for NCAA. They will probably, on a case-by-case basis, when it comes up, Ted, have to look at a student's potential college interests and would that college count the computational thinking as a math credit or not. So they would have to probably do some research there. We don't think it's going to be a super high volume. We run, give or take, 2 sections each semester of computational thinking. So we have a fair number of students in it over the course of a year, but the number of those where this would be kind of the make or break for meeting the math credit requirements, either for our local diploma or even, I think, for college admissions, probably isn't that extensive. Most of those students are probably taking this on top of 3 or 4 credits in math.
So we would be looking for a motion to. I make a motion that we approve that for a math credit.
Second.
Any other questions or concerns? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, Tim.
By the opener, now it's the main act.
Now it's the main
Now
act.
it's the main act. So, next, Lisa Jondal and Pam Emmerich presented to our curriculum committee bilingual implementation program plan. As you may recall, last year we filed for a waiver as we met the threshold for requirements for a bilingual program, and so they've been working really hard on putting a plan together for next year. So thank you for presenting to us today.
Yes. Can you pull up the slideshow, Rebecca? We just have a few slides with some visuals that will help support the conversation. And we are going to talk a little bit more about some staffing implications when we get to that point. So thank you for allowing us to be here. As you know and have heard previously, there has been a lot of work and a lot of research put together from previous groups. And they have sort of paved the way to get to the point where we are right now. As Katie mentioned, the bilingual education requirements are set forth by DPI, and they can go to, yep, perfect. Item B there shows you what those threshold amounts are. So we have already met the threshold in that K3 grade band, which means you have that amount of students who speak the same language outside of English in a given location. And so we met that almost 2 years ago now, and henceforth began planning for this process. We have also met the threshold in our high school. And so since we have met those requirements, we began the planning process. We are on a waiver and are looking to implement an actual bilingual program starting next year.
So then for the next few slides, we're going to be taking a look at some data. And as you can see, this is looking at the number of English language learners that the district has seen and the growth, which is substantial over the last 5 years. And currently, and with the largest amount of growth occurring from 2021 to 2021-22. Currently, we have around 70% of our English language learners are Spanish speakers. And in speaking with Angie, our district interpreter and translator, primarily in the beginning few years when we first were receiving English language learners, our students were immigrating from Mexico. That's shifted somewhat in the last year or two, where most of our students now are coming from Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Venezuela. And in those countries, particularly to escape some political unrest that is occurring there.
Help me understand those numbers there a little bit. So we've got 143, we're not adding that many new students per year. You're just
showing growth. That's how many students we
So we've got is it a growth of 3 or?
So from last year to this year, we have had a growth of 3 students. We've added a few more recently, so our numbers are close to 150. So over the past 5 years, we've seen over a doubling the amount of students that are identifying as English language learners, with the vast majority being Spanish speakers.
Understood.
And it can be a little bit of an ebb and flow. A lot of our families have come here to stay with other families, so they might be doubled up until they can secure housing. And so while it might not be a giant net from last year to this year, there's movement within. So we lose some, we gain some, we lose some, we gain some. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
So for the first slide, you will see some information that is previous growth and in previous years. And there's a narrative in that first link, the status and growth link, that again explains a bit more about our students. And as Lisa had said, it shows starting the years that we became eligible for bilingual, bicultural programming in the district. So if you want to scroll down a bit. So during the last school year, we were looking at Heritage and Prairie Elementary School meeting that threshold. So what we have to keep in mind is that it is based on building. So looking at those schools that are highlighted in yellow, Heritage, of course, has met the criteria, as well as Prairie Elementary. And as we look at this year, we are looking at, again, this is in the fall of 2022. If you want to just keep scrolling down a bit, thank you so much. We're looking at, again, at Heritage Elementary, Prairie Elementary, and at the high school, meeting those threshold numbers. So according to DPI, we are required to implement a bilingual, bicultural program. So to look more specifically at what that looks like for our Spanish-speaking students, we've been really looking closely at our data this year of students, and that's shown in the second link there. And what you'll see here are the number of Spanish-speaking students and other ELs, but we're really looking at the number of Spanish-speaking students by building and by level. And when we look at level, we're speaking in terms of students' English proficiency levels. So when we look at a level 1 student, they have limited to no acquisition of the English language. We often refer to those students as our newcomers or our emerging bilinguals. When we look at our level 3s and 4s, they have a better grasp of the English language. We're looking at kind of what we call our developing students. When a student reaches a level 5, they're exited from the program and no longer eligible for direct services, but we monitor those students for 2 years following when they exit. So as we look here at this data, we see that Heritage Elementary has the highest number of Spanish-speaking students currently with 25 students. Prairie Elementary has 17 students. Arboretum has 4 Spanish-speaking students. The intermediate school has 18 students. The middle school has 14 students, and the high school has 21 students. So when we look at those numbers, we can see that we can estimate that over time we're going to be meeting those thresholds in the other grade levels as well. So when districts meet that threshold of numbers, DPI offers kind of, we'll say, a menu of options that districts can choose from, but there's local control as to what model a district chooses. And it's a pretty lengthy document. So the committee, and also after having many conversations with our CISA 2 support person, we looked at several of these models, but have decided to move forward with a heritage bilingual model, and that I think is number 6 on the diagram. And we chose this model for a few reasons. First, looking at the number of students that we have, this fits in nicely, again, with our current numbers, and even looking at projected growth. Also, we like the fact that it is what we call an additive model, so we really want to make sure that our Spanish-speaking students that we're building and supporting their native language. And given our current resources as well, this is a really nice model that will fit in nicely with our district. We also know that given our current resources, this is a model that allows for instruction that is less than 50% during the day. So any students that would be involved in this heritage model we would have less than half of the day would be instructed in Spanish. And I can provide some more details in a moment on what that looks like. So more specifically for next year, we're looking at, one building where it gets a little interesting is that we're looking at implementing a heritage bilingual model at Heritage Elementary School. A little confusing there. So we're looking at having, meeting again, looking at that K through 3 band. We're looking at having 2 cohorts of bilingual classrooms. So one bilingual teacher will be closely connected to one classroom teacher in kindergarten and one classroom teacher in first grade. Our Spanish speakers will be clustered in those grade levels. And there will also be monolingual or English-speaking students in that classroom. The bilingual teacher will be doing kind of a co-teaching and co-planning model with that classroom teacher. And the bilingual teacher will be in that classroom for prioritizing English language arts, so reading and writing, and math as well. Then that same bilingual teacher will also be supporting a first grade classroom. Again, co-teaching, co-planning with a first grade teacher, supporting ELA and math. And then again, kind of that co-planning, co-teaching, cohesive model. The same thing would occur in second and third grade, where that second bilingual teacher will be connected closely to a second grade teacher, where Spanish speakers will reside, and again in third grade. It's pretty common, what we've talked about as well is having students that are currently Spanish-speaking students that are Arboretum, and also at Prairie. Families would have the option to have their children attend the bilingual program that will be located at Heritage. And it's very common for districts that they have one school site, depending on how the site is, they may have multiple school sites where their bilingual students or the bilingual program is housed. Now at the at the high school level, where we've also met the threshold, we have many great systems and programs in place to support our newcomer students and our Spanish-speaking students. But right now, we do not have programming that would meet that bilingual, bicultural program. And so we are looking at adding a heritage biology course that will be having 9th grade students and 10th grade and 11th graders, still with very manageable numbers. The slight difference is that we're looking at that program being more for students who are newcomers and who may have difficulties excelling in the regular biology program at the high school. That's a lot of information. I don't know if we want to pause for questions or if we want to just go through.
I think we'll go through the staffing part because I think that might fill in some of the gaps, and then we'll bring back together for additional questions you might have. I just also want to clarify that the co-teaching model is very similar to our ESL model, which we currently have in place. So if in Pam's current position, she co-teaches in 5th grade. So we have English language learning students clustered in a classroom, and she's in there during ELA time already supporting those kids. So programmatically, that in-class support doesn't look a lot different than what we have now. The other piece is that there would be some instruction strictly in Spanish, probably in like a science type of time, where the kindergarten and 1st grade cohort would be pulled together with the bilingual teacher, and only that small group receiving instruction specifically in Spanish. And then there's something else that it's called translanguaging. So you're really working on academic language in both languages. And again, that would be really working with that bilingual teacher and the small cohort group. So what the implications are for staffing, I'm gonna start a little bigger and then try to hone it down so that it makes sense by building. And then I'll open it up to some additional conversations and questions. So our current department allocation on paper is 8.0. So we have 7.5 teacher allocation. Pam serves as a 0.5 teacher, 0.5 bilingual coordinator right now. next year with this additional programming, we are looking for a 2.0 FTE add to support the program, and I'll get into what that means in a second. We also may be able to shift some of Pam's coordinating role back into some teacher time, because right now all of this planning and investigating is a really heavy lift, and we're hoping that once the program is implemented, there will still be some additional work to be done, but we'll learn kind of as we go. Next slide. So I put together a little table just to try to make sense of where those allocations would go. And I have projected up here because in this scenario, Heritage would have the vast majority of all Spanish-speaking students who are eligible for bilingual programming. So that would pull some of the Arboretum students, it would pull some of the Prairie students into the Heritage program. So that's why you see that increase there. It's also the asterisk means that's where the bilingual programming would be along with the high school. So the projected change column, if we just go straight across, currently Arboretum has a 0.4 teacher that's paired with a 0.6 at Heritage. So it's one person, but I would be looking to still keep that support because there will still be some English language students at Arboretum, but they would continue on in the model that they have right now, which would not be the bilingual model. It would be the ESL.
But they could attend if they chose
They
to.
could attend Heritage. Same with Prairie. We currently have a 1.0 and a para-educator. I would likely keep 1.0 there to support those K4 students. But if all the other students who are eligible went to Heritage, I would shift that para-educator from Prairie to Heritage. So it's not an add, it's just a shift. But to support the program needs, we talked about the co-teaching and co-planning. We would have 1.0 in addition at Heritage. So they would go from 1.6 to 2.6. Intermediate school, it would stay the same with a potential internal shift. And then those three bottom, like 0.2, 0.4, 0.4, that's where the other 1.0 would be created from. So we'd be adding a little bit of teacher time at the middle school. We would take the person who is part-time currently at the middle school and part-time at the high school and make her full-time at the high school because she is bilingual certified and we need a full-time bilingual certified teacher at the high school to implement the program. And so what we have with the middle school 0.6 and the final piece is I'm looking to give Angie, who's done a fantastic job of really doing a lot of great family outreach and making our registration and family teacher conferences and board communication and everything really accessible to our Spanish speaking and other language families. And she has done so many great things. And she's really, really busy. So I'd like to give her a little bit of help, and it also rounds out the position potentially with that middle school teaching. So we wouldn't have part-time people, we would have full-time people with part-time spots that they could share. So I would look at that district-wide person to support Angie, but also to do, more of the educational pieces, the family teacher conferences and that sort of thing. Again, a lot of information. We are not married to these projections. They will vary based on the allocation of the students and where they end up. But because we're looking at an increase to support a program, I just want to be really transparent in what it would look like. And I think some really great news, one more slide. We have some funding sources that can help support this work already. So it's not all budgetary requests. I will reference my handy partner Steve here in case necessary, but we are looking to be able to utilize some transfer of service funds to support some of this additional allocation. Once we have a bilingual program in place, we're also eligible for some DPI state aid. And that comes back in the form of reimbursement based on the collection of data that you're able to provide. And there's just DPI forms that you complete for that.
Is the state aid ongoing, or is it a one-time deal?
The Title III grant is able to supplement our materials and training and professional development. We already have that, but obviously that would continue. And then finally, as our sort of last resort, if we need it, it's included in a budget request based on what may be left to support. So thank you, that was a lot. What questions do you have before we get into some final communication and logistic pieces?
If I could just add something, Lisa, first of all, thank you guys for both being here and presenting it and all your work on that. But I mean, Steve, just to kind of jump back to the transfer of service, we've been really trying to be aggressive with our use of transfer of service funds. And I think our initial view is that we're going to be able to fund the type of increase that Lisa and Pam are proposing here through some of our transfer of service funds, so the impact on the rest of the budget would be minimal.
That's correct.
How do you deal with the 25%? So 75% are Spanish, so the other languages. How does that actually function?
Yep, great question. So students who would not be Spanish speaking would continue to be supported in our ESL model, where the goal is proficiency in English. So it might be modifying work, it might be using other translation services, but the goal is really to get them to be able to navigate academic work in English only. It's a great question. We do have multiple other languages, and not a lot of other people who speak them.
Are we close to meeting, I know this was asked in our curriculum committee too, but are we close to meeting the threshold in another language?
We're really not.
Okay.
We're really not. No, because it needs to be in a grade band, and we're really not.
Okay.
Yeah, Pam and Lisa, just for the edification of kind of people who are listening, I mean, we have 150 kids who fall into kind of our English language learner area. We have a lot of them are Spanish, but how many other languages do we serve? I mean, I think the last time I asked that question, we were at 13, 14, something of that nature. Is that still accurate?
I think so.
That's what, that we pulled from.
Yeah,
during
you
the
have
last
Mandarin
professional
Chinese, you
development
have some of the
district-wide.
Eastern Bloc languages, you have some of them from the African languages, so there's kind of a plethora of kids that have come to us from different parts of the world, and we service all of them, and that's through that other model.
And when you were talking of transferring to Heritage, so you went to Heritage, it was their entire day is at Heritage, this isn't a transfer through.
Correct. Yep. And so, and I have this on a later about logistics, but we would set up the opportunity to provide busing just like we would, but we would have a shuttle or something that would make sure we pick them up where they live and get them to where they need to go. Rebecca, do you want to go through the other logistical slides? That might take care of a couple of other things. We have some communication pieces we want to make sure that are really clear. Obviously, we've had a staff meeting at Heritage, we've done the committee meeting, we're here tonight. We are planning some family outreach and education already next week and again in March. And with approval tonight, we would like to get those positions posted in March. As you can imagine, the shortages that we have in staffing in general, bilingual positions are incredibly difficult to fill. So we'd like to get ahead of that as soon as we possibly can.
So we're also looking at having some additional consult days with CISA 2. We have been meeting with a woman who's very much an expert in the area of bilingual programming, and she will continue to work with our bilingual teachers at Heritage to look at curriculum. And like Lisa said, there's kind of a finesse to doing what's called this translanguaging piece, where we're kind of really trying to use students' native languages to help build and support English, and vice versa. So she'll be giving some support to bilingual teachers around kind of that translanguaging concept. We also will be thinking about ordering of many materials. We need to have texts and other resources available in Spanish, and also having some parallel texts. Those are two similar books in English and in Spanish. So we hope to also continue to work with her in just kind of a coach into the following year as well. Looking at staffing and scheduling, Lisa and I have met with the principal and assistant principal at Heritage right now. They've done a wonderful job in trying to play around what this could look like for next year. It's not an easy thing to accomplish because, for example, when we have that K1 cohort, kindergarten and first grade, they need to have, those two classrooms will have to have science at the same time, so that bilingual teacher can pull those Spanish-speaking students and have that multi-age science Spanish time. Also, we have to make sure, for example, in those clusters that ELA and math have to be opposite of one another. So they've already kind of done some initial work on looking at what that schedule could potentially look like. We, as Lisa mentioned, there was a staff meeting at Heritage to share with the staff what this program and what this model could look like, and really trying to generate some interest from classroom teachers if they're interested in working in this type of a program and model. And we'll continue to do that work and hopefully identify those people soon so we can start that last bulleted point doing some co-planning. They can do some co-planning together and work on some of those curriculum pieces. The last piece that is not there, we are going to be doing some site visits to Middleton and Verona. Although their program looks somewhat different than ours will, they do have a high school biology course in Spanish. Both of those districts do, so we'd like to see that up and running. And then also looking at that science strand we'll be implementing. Both Verona and Middleton have that as well. They have science instruction in Spanish at the elementary school.
So, you clarified this at the curriculum meeting, but, so this is going to be a blended class of non-Spanish speaking and Spanish speaking students. If a parent has concern about the kid being in there because of maybe special needs that their own student has, or a parent would want their kid to be in it because of the enrichment potential, are there opt-in, opt-out options for those parents, or how does that work?
Well, based on our current practice, I mean, I feel like we sort of have a precedent with this because we already cluster our students. I am a little bit worried about how we would navigate. I think when you have the potential for some dual language opportunities, that could be a really attractive piece. So we wouldn't start off next year having an opt-in, opt-out. We would just continue our cluster. We have a lot to learn next year. We'll have to get feedback on how the scheduling process works, the cohort model, all of those things. And so I think in practice, you wouldn't see a big change in terms of the classroom environment. The pull-out Spanish instruction, that would be a very big change in our practice, and that's gonna require a lot of training and learning, mostly for our bilingual staff members. And we'll see, those student groups are relatively small. So a classroom might have, 5 students or 7 students, not different than what we have right now. But the change for monolingual students it just wouldn't be here.
Thank you.
Yes, that's the question.
Thank you.
So do these kids stay with the group all day then, or you're talking about cohort classes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're with those students the entire day? Or
So
the same students?
you mean in a homeroom setting? So the kindergarten students would be clustered in their homeroom setting, just like they are right now. And then
Okay.
the first grade students would be within theirs. The only time that they would be pulled together is when they would be pulled out for that Spanish instruction in science, for example. So it doesn't change the homeroom structure, it just changes the bilingual person's sort of schedule.
And that happens like once a day or whenever they have science?
Yeah,
Is-
it might be 30 minutes, it might be 40 minutes. But mostly those students are in their classrooms as they are now.
And the monolingual students or English-speaking students would stay with their homeroom teacher they would just, that number of students during their regular science time would be reduced somewhat because some of the students will be leaving for that Spanish science.
And at Heritage, for K through 3, or the 3rd grade class, for example, they wouldn't have one teacher that teaches them ELA and one teacher that teaches them math at Heritage, right? Because that's a model that's, Arboretum may have that, or Prairie may have that. So they would just have, not just, but they would have 2 teachers supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that what you were asking?
Just trying to understand the program.
Okay.
Any other questions? Phenomenal program, really exciting, and I appreciate all the work you've done, but I also appreciate your insight into how much we have to do yet.
There's been a lot of work and a lot of research, and we just kind of, need to get going so we can learn what we don't know.
And I think we're looking to take action on this.
Yes, we are.
We'll need
So
a
do we-
motion to approve this plan.
I move, did you make a motion?
I did not, I just.
Just 1 second. I mean, if it's a required program, doesn't positions already go along with it? Do we still have to approve positions that are?
I think we're approving the
Required.
plan.
We're approving the plan.
And then from the plan, we will then determine kind of what our staffing needs are, and then that'll be built in.
Okay.
So, but some of those may get posted early, as Lisa said, so that we can get into the market, and then those will be included into as you kind of move the budget piece forward. Is that kind of your vision budgetarily, Steve? Correct, and we'll be able to articulate where the funds come from for
So
that.
we're needing to approve that heritage model.
Right, the
Which is
heritage.
one of 7 options, I think, from
Correct.
DPI.
Yeah, so in general, Brian, in essence, you are approving the model. The model does require some additional staffing, which then we can plan around.
Like
So-
the other 6.
So Katie made a motion.
Well,
Mark made the motion to, and did somebody
I'll
second
second.
it? And Ted is seconding it. And are there any other questions or concerns? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Exciting.
And next, facility committee. Sorry, guys, for making you hang out there. You learned a lot. I'm glad you feel that. Come on up, because we are,
work.
yeah. We have a lot of work with you guys too. So we have Jay and Rich here from Vogel. And John.
That's right up there, Rebecca.
So maybe I can turn it over to Steve to do the intro and kind of help out with this presentation and turning it over to the guys.
Sure, thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
So there's a number of items on the agenda tonight that are action items from the facility committee. Several of them had recommendations from the facility committee. A few of them did not, because the bids were not ready at the time of the meeting. We're going to set the stage for the action items by having a high-level overview of the information that was shared with the facility committee. Jay is going to drive on that from Vogel Brothers for a moment to basically provide an update as to the planning for Heritage Elementary School. Jay's gonna talk about the bid process over the next couple of months and what you see in front of you tonight. And then the work that has taken place on the district-wide maintenance list, and then again, some of the action items you're gonna see tonight. So we will turn it over to Jay to run through this information, and then we'll jump into the action items.
Perfect. Good evening.
Good evening.
So as Steve alluded to, really tonight, what we're gonna hit as part of this presentation is an update on the Heritage Elementary planning process and budget. There's a few scope awards, and Rich will get into those in a little more detail further down on the agenda, and then talk through the maintenance scope report. So just a little refresher here, there's a couple slides. Obviously, the breakdown of the referendum amount of the 175 million broke into 4 major categories, with 63,660 for the elementary and heritage facility. the middle school of, I can't even hardly read that, 99,920.
920.
Too many nines in there. And then a little over $5 million for work at the high school, and then the TLC in the district office, and then the maintenance work just under $6.4 million. So back in June, and then ultimately the information was finalized in July, we had presented the detailed budget information for each of those specific scopes. So this is just a reminder of Heritage and what made up the 63,660,000. And what I want to just hit on here quickly is that budget was really developed with this very conceptual level site plan. And this spreadsheet here was what identified all of the spaces that were proposed to be within that facility. So a lot of preliminary conceptual information that was driving those budgets. Where we sit today, so we received the schematic drawings from the design partners over at EUA. Just quickly on schematic drawings, what that means. Typically through the design process, there's 3 major milestones: schematic, design development, and then construction documents. So this is the first of the 3 milestones of drawings. We actually just received the design development drawings about a week ago, so we've continued to move along that process, but what we're presenting today is a budget based on those schematic drawings. We also had preliminary information related to all the systems and the specs for all the systems at a high level that go into the space. Data sheets for each of the rooms that say what's going to happen in those rooms, what you need for marker boards, tack boards, casework, anything that's going to go into those spaces. We did leverage existing intermediate drawings a little bit for some details too, because at a schematic level there still isn't a lot of detail in the drawings. It's more floor plans, elevations, and a lot of information that you've seen as a district. And then we had detailed review with not only the design team, but with the district administration as well. As part of this budgeting effort, we quantified everything within the building, so whether it was linear foot of wall, square foot of flooring, square foot of masonry on the exterior, number of windows, everything that goes into that building we quantified ourselves. But we also reached out to vendors in the community too to get budget pricing from them based on the level of information we have. Here's just a high level, the parameters of the current design. So it's 152,000 square feet, average height of 32 feet. Around the perimeter of it's just over 2,100 linear feet, and then we're still looking at 16-month schedule. Again, those really play into the quantities and the budgeting process. And then here's an update on today, and I'm going to hit this quick and then go to the next slide because that shows a side-by-side, which is a little bit easier to look at. So again, looking at construction contingency soft cost for a total of the 63,660. What you see here is a way more detailed site plan than the conceptual information we had back this summer. And then you also see a floor plan and a rendering similar to what was presented to the board a few months back from EUA. And so from a budget standpoint, as you review these side to side, again, the total stays the same, but as we've learned more information throughout the design process, we've reallocated some of the contingencies. The next slide, I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Right now, again, we went from this conceptual information to the schematic information, and that's really driving the information that we do know. So this breaks down a little bit more into the contingency, which I'll hit this chart and then I'll get back up to these dates as Steve alluded to. So when we established that contingency way back in June, as you remember, market volatility was a lot hotter of a topic back this summer. So from an escalation standpoint, we were carrying numbers for escalation. We also had contingency broken into 3 aspects, what we call owner contingency. So that'd be things that the district wanted within the facility that nobody knew about in June as the design progressed. Good examples of that would be as EUA sat down with the staff and really understood how they were going to use the spaces, the classrooms, and the other flex spaces. Also figuring out the adjacencies of all those classrooms and how that ultimately determined the layout of the building. From a design standpoint, we also carried contingency money few items, examples of design decisions that get made. One was in relation to the geothermal field. Now we have information about how that soil is gonna perform, and that's how we're able to size, from a design standpoint, how many bores actually go into that geothermal field. Another example would be setting up the roof structure to be able to add down the road in the future photovoltaic across that entire structure. So making sure that structure is designed day one and built day one to be able to accommodate that down the road. Another contingency aspect is the construction and estimating contingency. So this is an example of, contingency dollars that we would have from an estimating standpoint. As you looked at that conceptual image on the previous slide, we anticipated the perimeter of this conceptual image and multiplied that by 25% to take a stab at all the fenestration and what the actual final perimeter would be. In this case, we were off by a little bit there, and so that's an example of where the estimating contingency would be. But again, as the design gets closer and closer to completion, we're able to refine those contingencies. But right now, that's how they've been reallocated within the project. If you look overall here, we're still sitting at over 10% contingency. It's nearly 11%. I believe it's about 10.8. And at this stage of a project, that's still a really, really strong contingency. I'll identify some savings that we've targeted, and you'll even see today some have already come to fruition. So as we move forward, obviously, we're still going to target savings and be able to refund that contingency. As it ties into the dates and those bid packages, so those 3 bid packages are when we'll be getting harder bid numbers for various scopes of work. And at those points, then we'll relook at that contingency, and ultimately in that June 2023, we would be able to say, here's the amount of contingency that needs to stay for construction, and then ideally be able to appeal some of that off for other opportunities within the referendum.
Just help me understand where the money goes. We went from 9.2 million in June down to 5.5.
Yep.
So we put out a not to exceed referendum,
Yep.
right? So does that 4 million then go into other projects that we could, where does it go? Help.
Yeah, so right now, nothing has gone out of the 63,660,000 Jack for other
Right.
projects. Right now, we're still keeping this contingency in here until we get to that June date and set a guaranteed maximum price.
Right.
And then at that point, any additional contingency funds could go back into other projects.
So basically, as you settle down on your contingency,
Yep.
we've got a contingency of 9.2 still built into the project, but when you settle this number down as you get closer, then that 4 million can be released to other projects. Because
Yeah.
your contingency is going down.
Yeah,
and
so
your
let me
pricing
clarify, I
goes
think
down.
we're talking 2 different things, I think, potentially, Jack. Right now, the 9 million that was carried in June,
Yep.
the difference between that and the 5.5 has been allocated into the construction based on some of the design changes, owner changes, estimating things that we've learned. Ultimately, any money that would be saved and be able to go to other projects would be once we set a final number, and it would be out of the 5.5.
Okay, so
Does that make
that
sense?
4 million has been allocated
Yeah, the 3.7.
someplace.
Yeah,
or
allocated within the project.
within the project already.
Yep.
Once that scope became more clearly defined, we were able to shift it from contingency to a specific trade or scope of work.
Without anything being started yet, isn't that a fairly high number at this stage of the game to be shifted, or it seems like a lot?
Ted, not necessarily high. One thing, if you look at from an escalation standpoint, I didn't really hit on it here, but we did, now that we have a hard schedule for the project, we were able to build escalation. We hope all the escalation we need into the project. So we were carrying about, I think this was about 18%, Ted. So right now, about 7%'s been expended. But typically what you're gonna see from when you go from a spreadsheet and the conceptual drawing here to actual floor plans, outline specifications, elevations, that's where you're gonna have probably your biggest use of contingency, because now we really know and it's on paper and we're able to react to what those changes are. So, you know, I would anticipate as we move forward here that we should stay, you're not gonna see as big of a jump, if that makes sense.
And you still have some cost savings pieces that we're evaluating, which I know was a future slide here.
Yeah. Yeah, let me jump there and then we can jump back, there's more questions, because that could help. So, again, here's some opportunity for savings. So our budget is based on those documents. From a site work standpoint, we anticipate a potential for about $200,000 of savings. Rich is gonna go through the bid tabs. Actually, the two low bidders, right now are even, there's a little bit more savings than $200,000 based on the two bidders. So that was based on, you know, being able to spoil materials on site and borrowing materials on site and how that was all gonna play out once the documents got finalized. We didn't really know that when we got this set to budget, but as the design developed, we were able to bring some of those savings to the table. The second one is another great example where we already think there's half of the savings allowed there, and this is an example where the district and EUA were working on different options for interior design for ceilings, flooring, different areas. And what was on the schematic drawings was just an example of what it could be. We budgeted it based on that to make sure we had it covered. In this case, after some back and forth with the district and the entire team, we think we're gonna be able to save about half of that $300,000. So again, those would be, you know, there's about $500,000 even that would go back into that contingency, and then in June, ultimately, hopefully we can come back out. The building exterior is another one. We haven't totally finalized this yet, but there's some alternative ways to maintain that look, but use some alternative systems for the metal panels specifically, and then the systems that hold those metal panels. So we're working with EUA to come up with an or equal or a similar equal product that to drive some additional savings there. These are just, again, 3 examples. Obviously, as we move forward, we're always looking for cost-effective, high-quality options for the district. And those are things that are presented to Randy and Steve and John as we meet on a weekly and bi-weekly basis. Vendor selections, I'm just gonna hit this quick, and then Rich will get into more detail further on the agenda. These are the 3 that Rich will present to you. And then, right now in March, we feel as though there might be 2 more that we would like to bring to the board. And again, this was just in a way to make sure from the schedule standpoint that we're mitigating any issues for long lead items, and also reserving resource and capacity in the subcontracting market. Those will likely be the last couple we need in March, and then the remainder we would identify to just target final numbers in that June package. I'm gonna shift gears to the maintenance work quick. So again, that was nearly $6.4 million. Over the last couple months, we've been busy with the administration on that maintenance list, really prioritizing the projects. So if you recall, you have a very long maintenance list that projects useful life for everything within your district, whether it's past its useful life or still has remaining useful life. So we pulled forward information from that list. We also met with John and got a list of high priority items that may or may not be on the maintenance list. And then we updated budgets for all of those items. And we're able to help prioritize what could fall within the 6.4 million. And then we also looked at up to 10 million. So if there is monies that become available from a funding standpoint, within the fund, what are some of those next projects on the list that you might want to attack as a district? What we're proposing now is that we've got a couple items for this summer, but that we would revisit this towards the end of the year in early January, because at that point we'll be in a spot where we'll have hard numbers on the middle school scope as well. So we'll have a lot more firm picture of what the financials look like for those 2 large projects, and be able to identify what else can maybe be allocated to maintenance. We also looked at grouping of projects. So from an efficiency standpoint, we looked at types of work. So if you're gonna do the ceilings in a certain portion of a school, let's look at the lighting and any low voltage systems that are wiring above those ceilings. Timing, we're also looking at, making sure we can have information out to the bidding market early enough ahead of typically the summers. So doing it in this time of the year so we can get resources lined up and take advantage of that bidding economy of scale, that's looking at combining work with other projects. The high school is a great example of this, where there is some other smaller referendum projects within that high school, and then timing maintenance work in the high school as well. So that way, instead of coming in there a couple times, we're able to get subcontractors in there just once over the summer and do larger scopes of work and really economy of scale there. And then obviously minimizing the disruption to the buildings, to the staff, and to the students in those buildings. And so really trying to identify each building and trying to get in there once and doing a majority of the work and getting out so we can minimize that disruption. As we met with the administration and reviewed the projects, this is what we're proposing for the scope breakdown. So again, in the middle school, there we're looking at really roofing and some fire alarm work to happen this summer in that space. Right now, we're carrying a budget of $725,000 for that. We'd obviously, if it gets approved today, we'd go out and start the documentation and bidding process for that and bring those back to the board. Summer of 2024 is where we're targeting the majority of the work at the high school. And then we would do this along with those other high school projects that are included in the referendum scope. 25 then, we would target both Prairie and the district office. As you can see, there's about $800,000 at Prairie and then $70,000 here at the district office. Again, the district office work would be timed with the other work slated to happen as part of the referendum. And then Arboretum in 2026 is what we're currently targeting. And again, all but the middle school work, we feel like we should come back about a year, a little less than a year from now, and revisit what the prioritization can be and what the actual funding ability is.
It's coming down, right?
What's that? And then Steve, did you want to hit this as part of the other agenda, or?
Yeah, we'll come back to it.
Mark?
So I don't know if this is a question for you, John, or Steve, but so we've got this $6+ million going to maintenance work. We have a new intermediate, elementary school going up, a new middle school going up. With that combination, I believe we had like a $20 million projection of maintenance needs. Those three combined, how does that affect that $20 million list?
So that 20, Mark, that's a great question. That 20 million, we had already stripped out Heritage from that. We left the middle school though, because you're still gonna have that facility, it's just gonna be part of the high school. So that 20 did have Heritage already pulled out of there. Does that make sense? The other thing I'd like to mention about the middle school is, as part of the prioritization, we focused on building envelope and things that would happen that wouldn't necessarily get touched if you did a more major renovation to the middle school down the road, once you figure out how it's gonna interact with the high school. And so we tried to make sure that we were being cognizant of putting money towards stuff that wouldn't be wasted down the road.
Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind jumping out of the presentation, we'll go back to the action items.
You need us, Steve?
Sure. So the next couple of items on the agenda are the action items for the bid packages that Jay just reviewed in the PowerPoint. Just please keep in mind that at the time of the facility committee, we did not present what you see in front of you tonight to that committee. So Rich is going to talk you through that process for each of these three items. The first one is earthwork, and if Rebecca could pull up the bid tab, and we will turn it over to Rich to review the bid results.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rich Stoffels, and I'm a project manager with Vogel Brothers Building Company. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, although our son has been through the district, we're residents of this district, it is unbelievably comforting to know the level of work and the caring and compassion that goes in with these educators and things that are looking out for our future generations, and I didn't want that to go unacknowledged, so thank you. So what's up here on screen is a bid tab for earthwork and site utilities. So that'd be all of your dirt moving, your building excavation, and then your storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water, gas, that type of thing. We went out to a group of 7 earthwork and site utility contractors with a package that included the civil set of documents from, that was submitted to the Waunakee Plan Commission. At the time, we did not have the geotech report, which is where we come out and do some subsurface investigation for the new site. However, we had it for the intermediate school, so that was included in the initial package. Time allowed us to get out there and get the one done also for our new site. So that is all, that information is also included in this, to try and give them as much information as possible. We went out to those 7, 4 responded of those 7. The 3 that did not was either capacity issues, a sense of, others being involved and maybe this wasn't the best arena for them kind of thing, right? There could be a litany of reasons why people don't respond. Of the 4 that did respond, 2 were outliers, if you will, Integrity and Houston, the 2 numbers in the red there. And then the 2 that we were really focusing on were Madison Crushing and Parisi. The number on the far right, Vogel Brothers number, depicts our budget. And the numbers, the bottom numbers under Crushing and Parisi, show where they came in at. So very, very competitively looked at by those 2 companies. We've got experience with all these companies. I have the utmost confidence that either Crushing or Parisi can do the work and perform the work at a very, very high level. And really that's what we're asking for you all to evaluate tonight. For what it's worth, I believe there was some supplemental information submitted by one of the 2 that we're discussing right now as it relates to their local ties to the community. So I just thought that that should be touched on, and I believe is also included as part of the package.
I would make the motion to go with a low bid at this point. If you're confident that both companies are going to do.
Well, we're also looking at the letter from Parisi. I think there's something to be considered there too, not just the low bid.
Where is Madison Crushing located?
Madison.
And where's
Hepker, or that Hepker Road.
Hepker Road, yes.
Do you feel that they have a Waunakee tie with their employees? To your
Great question. From a
knowledge?
leadership standpoint, no. From a field standpoint, I couldn't speak whether they do or not.
Yeah, I have to agree with Judy. I think having, I think we owe our local vendors the opportunity to do this work if they're not way off.
Where's Parisi located? Are they located in Waunakee?
Their office is not, but Bob Endress is located in Waunakee. I believe they have an asphalt plant. I think it listed in there, didn't it, Rich?
Mm-hmm.
The letter.
They're in Verona.
So they live in the community, but I think when we started looking at giving local vendors, an opportunity to compete on this, it was more for the economic development and looking at companies that were located, in the school boundary.
I'll second Jack's motion.
I know when we talked in our budget committee that we'll come up with financing, I think a strong emphasis was put on doing the best for our constituents financially, and given that the Madison Crushing, was almost $40,000 less, I guess $30,000 less.
I would support that kind of a recommendation.
Along with the fact that Rich, they're pretty confident and they both can do the work, I mean, equally. I would agree.
Motion in a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. No. Okay, moving on to Ready Mix.
Yes, so here's a similar bid tab, however, broken out when we're talking about concrete ready mix suppliers, we're talking about different mix designs, different design strengths. So that's what's represented on the column on the far left. We had your three major players in our area, Winger Ready Mix, Lycon, Advanced Concrete. Sure as the majority of you know, Advanced Concrete is a local entity. And obviously displayed a bit of hunger here, so maybe some turf protection, however you want to look at it, right? So again, our budget is on the far right. Two of the three came in under budget, with Advanced Concrete leading that charge. So this would be
Make the motion to go with the Advanced Concrete.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
I know it's Monday night and the enthusiasm is, but we're getting ready to get into concrete reinforcing steel, so now it's getting real exciting. So anyway, as we estimate, they alluded to this a little bit, right? Along the way, we're gonna have some wins and losses, and although these are all showing over, we still, as a steward of, and I can't emphasize that enough, as a steward of your dollars, of the district's dollars, we still feel like there's opportunity here to look at and have some conversations with the structural engineer and just ask some questions about why they're showing things the way they're showing them. And if, all that shakes out, that's the path we'll go down. But in this particular instance, we've looked at some details and we think the potential exists. And that's all it is potential, that maybe some things could be pared back and we'd be able to reduce this number. This is one of those instances where our estimating pencil wasn't probably as sharp as maybe it should have been, had we had some discussions with the structural engineer. Whatever the case may be, we're trending just a little bit high here. Harris is out of the Belvedere Rockford area. Hatch is local out of Madison. Brock White's local out of Madison. For those of you that aren't familiar, the concrete reinforcing steel is the different diameter bars that you see that's placed within the formwork prior to the concrete being placed.
Motion to approve Harris rebar.
Second.
Can I ask Rich one question before you approve? Lead time, we didn't have issues with all three, correct?
Great clarification, yes, and I should have touched on that. Yeah, this was one of those that was pretty volatile. About a year ago, could take something that used to take a week or two to get was taking 8-10 weeks kind of thing. That volatility has calmed down, so lead time issues, along with shop drawings, capacity is there in all instances.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
So the next agenda item is related to the presentation as well. So Jay did reference on the maintenance, district-wide maintenance slide, the middle school for the summer of '23. So the facility committee did recommend approval of a planning process for maintenance work for the summer of '23 for the middle school roof and fire alarm system, and then bids will need to be brought back at a future meeting.
You needed a motion on that? Motion to approve the planning process?
Second.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
For the next agenda item, Robin Savola from EUA Architects was at the facility committee meeting to help share information about EUA's proposal for furniture procurement. The process is different than the process that was followed in 2014. The cost structure is half of what the fee was back in 2014, and the process looks a little different. The facility committee had the opportunity to learn about that process at the meeting and is recommending approval of that process at tonight's board meeting, and we did attach the presentation for your consideration.
We need a motion.
Mhm.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions on that process of collaborating? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And finally, the projects for the summer.
So, thank you, Joan. There's quite a few notes there, but I'll sum it up that the board has had a 3-year plan to close what is called Fund 41, which is a fund that for a period of time, we were investing capital maintenance dollars into. That fund is down to approximately $300,000 remaining. There was a memo included from John Kramer that shared a couple of projects that are on our list of work to do that could be used to close out Fund 41. So John shared that list with the committee at the meeting. The committee is recommending approval of those projects that would result in us closing Fund 41 as a district. John is here if anyone had any questions. We did include John's memo that explained information on those 3 projects, and the committee did recommend approval, which would go forward with closing out that capital maintenance Fund 41.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. I think we're done with facilities.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
Ed.
Guys.
Thank you very much. Wow, we really had a lot of committee work this month. Budget.
Go ahead,
So,
Steve.
there's one action item for your consideration this evening. There were a number of items on the committee agenda, but one of them that is brought forward tonight for consideration. So at the meeting, we did have Brett Whedon from PMA Zoom in to join the budget committee to review the interest rate options that are available to the district in regards to what's called bond proceeds management, which is the management of the referendum funds from the 2 borrowings so far that have been approved by the board. So at the meeting, Brett shared initial results of the responses from local banks as well as options through national banks and purchases through the federal government like U.S. Treasuries. As Brett reviewed that information with the budget committee, the committee did have a motion to forward to the board for consideration this evening. The budget committee recommended approval of an investment plan that provides a total investment to the one community bank of $30 million and then places additional investments beyond the $30 million based on the highest interest rate return available. It's important to note that the $30 million maximum at the one community bank includes all district accounts. So one community bank is the bank that the board approved in our last district bidding process. With all banks, they are only able to collateralize investments up to a certain level. So we've been working with one community bank to identify what that level is through them, and that level would be $30 million for all district investments, including the referendums. Beyond that, the committee did look at interest rate indications that were received from local Waunakee banks, as well as other options. And the committee made the recommendation to move forward utilizing the one community bank as our main investment locally in Waunakee for up to the maximum available, and then placing additional investments based on the highest return available. It is important to note that the committee did see an interest rate investment structure with the $99 million borrowing that was approved in January that did indicate interest rates accumulating over time in the $4.4 million range. And just for the community to be aware, Wisconsin state law allows school boards to utilize investment returns for two options. The first option would be referendum approved projects. So an example of that would be if the school board wanted to spend additional resources from the interest earnings towards the maintenance projects list, the board would be able to do that because district-wide maintenance was approved by the public in the referendum. The second option for the use of interest earnings would be to help pay for the debt costs associated with the referendum itself, and the board could choose to do both. So in past referendums, the board has chosen both paths, using some funds for the project, some funds to reduce property taxes and pay for debt. That's not a decision that needs to be made at this time, but just be aware of the fact that the investment plan is going to generate significant interest earnings over the next couple of years. And the committee just looked at the $99 million portion of the total $175 million, and that indicated about $4.4 million. So just keep that in mind as we move forward with this project. So that's the motion that was brought before the board for consideration tonight.
Make the motion to go with one community bank as they had the highest interest rate of the group.
Any questions on that? So we're going with one community bank to the max and then the highest interest rate thereafter. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Thank you. HR committee.
Okay, well, Brian brought us two things to be talking about, one for action and one for information.
Just, again, to keep the board fully informed and give you a chance to review the proposed plan structure before the full insurance package is brought to you for your vote in March. It did provide what the district's insurance committee has prepared as a plan structure using an increased contribution from the district of 3%. At a high level, just a quick reminder, we are coming off of our 5-year plan agreement that will end this June. And so we have had no real noticeable or significant structure changes, cost changes for 5 years. And so while this is a significant change, and it is an increased cost to the district, we feel it's a pretty financially responsible position for us to be in, to have, at this point, after 5 years, an increased contribution of 3% in a plan structure that does involve a change for employees, but we do feel it provides some of the things which are important to them, which are choices, The feedback we had received from the district employees eligible for insurance was that choices are very important to them, that they're very satisfied with our current provider, and that there's an interest in some potential new structures. And so, as you can see, our traditionally structured option remains. We have an HMO possibility, we have a point of service possibility, and we're proposing that we will offer a high deductible HSA combination plan option for employees that are interested. This has, I think, been something that the insurance committee has been working on for the school year. The HR committee has been, kept apprised of it as we've developed, and I think really there's an opportunity for questions by the board if you have some at this time.
What are the other districts, what increases are other districts getting?
And actually, I'm gonna tap into the best resource I can to give you that, which is Al Yeager, who's our USI consultant. And so, why don't you come on up here, Al, and you can give him, I could give him a summary of what you tell us, but you can give him straight from the source.
Speak fast.
Sure. If you're looking for a range of increases, it's across the board, and we've seen some as high as 19, 20 some odd %. I'd say the norm is in that 7 to 9% range.
So is our health clinic helping us? Our wellness clinic?
Yes.
Does anybody else have wellness clinics?
Up
in Dane County?
Dane County, Sunbury City School District, multiple others looking at it. I'd say in the Badger Conference, there's a handful of districts that do, being one of them as well.
Okay. Cool, thanks.
So this is information only, you're gonna bring back the entire benefit package next month with dental and other benefits that we offer.
Yep, correct. And so when we bring forward that package, we'll be able to talk a little bit about how some proposed changes in those other areas will really help offset the change that employees will see and feel, in terms of our plan structure.
So we're coming off the 5-year, are we rebidding next year then, or this year? Or is this a 1-year extension?
Well, I mean, when we talk about, we're not going out to the market, to be honest, because frankly, there isn't a real competitive market available. This is staying with Dean as our insurer. And I say this particular plan structure would be for the 23-24 school year, without, I think, a clear picture of what would be available to us after.
And Brian, just to add in there, the 3% increase is also with plan design change.
Correct.
So in order to, we didn't receive a 3%. The 3% was then we were able to get to the 3% because of plan design changes.
Yeah, thank you. The cap that we were provided was an 8.9% change, 8.9% increase with no changes. We, as insurance committee and with the feedback of employees, developed this particular plan structure to get to a 3% increase across the district.
Okay, so 3% next year increase. What's the future then looking like? Are we gonna rebid, or are we gonna just go year by year? What's the plan going forward?
Do you want to, talk a little bit about what's maybe in the market, and then we can talk about what our hope is as a district?
So we did have a cap. It wasn't rate hold like the prior 5 years. We had a cap. The cap was 7 point.
Was it 8.9 or was it?
Somewhere in that 8% range, we'll say. And when we worked down from that cap, it would have been higher had we not gotten that cap. We got the cap partially because of the engagement we had from the clinic, from the staff, and the objective would be to see how can we negotiate an additional cap, because we're outperforming what the actuaries are suggesting our increases should be. frankly, when our claims get to a level where we're not getting a good deal, it's certainly worth going out to market. I would also qualify the fact that it would be nearly 100% disruption for the staff, because the only competitive options in the marketplace right now are GHC and Quartz, and I'd say Quartz was not nearly as aggressive as what Dean and GHC have been.
Okay.
So, I don't think we're leaving anything on the table is the short answer right now.
You know, and then I would say future goals, Jack, would be, we continue to promote wellness activities such as the ones that the board put into place this year with the opportunity for staff to follow age-appropriate health recommendations. We continue to promote, and actually, we believe that this plan structure will really continue to promote the staff use of the clinic in a preventative fashion with those preventative tests. You know, we believe that that's going to continue to make us a healthier workplace, which will only then ultimately reduce our claims, which will make our medical loss ratio more attractive, which will hopefully make us continue to be get very competitive rate offers.
I'd like to commend the staff and administration and yourself, Val, for navigating us through and helping us maintain a competitive plan.
Al, does our wellness clinic contribute to the total monthly cost per family? Or, you know, I'm looking at the monthly premium for a single and for a family, so I'm trying to compare it to other dean districts. Are we lower than we might have been without that?
We are. We are lower than, in large part, my opinion, we certainly would not have had the extension on the cap had it not been for the clinic. We've seen improvement in engagement. It'll certainly have higher improvement in engagement for the upcoming year based on some of the additional incentives that the board moved forward with. So statistically, what we're seeing now more than ever is when we looked at like 850,000 members. For those that are engaged on an annual basis, like you incentivize versus not, we're seeing about a 5% delta in claims by doing that, an improvement in claims. 5% in claims more than makes up for that expense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then you've got an action item?
We do have one action item, which is a change, a proposed change to the hourly employee guidelines related to evaluation. Current language says that a staff person, when they're an hourly employee, will be evaluated in each of their first 3 years in the district, and then they're every 3 years after that. The proposal we're offering here would be that in the first year of employment, we would evaluate all hourly employees and then put them into the 3-year rotation. This is being driven, frankly, by the changes that we're experiencing in our turnover rate. You know, we have 198 hourly employees across the employee groups. This year, 152 of them are within their first 3 years. And that is in addition to our certified staff that need to be evaluated as well. And again, evaluation and supervision is very important, but we also have to recognize that the staff, the administrators that are responsible for these, it's an overwhelming number of evaluations to complete well. And if we can, again, get a good sense of how someone is performing when they come into the district and support them, we feel that we can continue to keep our staff high quality, but also manage just the number of annual observations needed.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Brian. And we are done with committees. Moving on to administrative report, we just have one thing there, second Friday count. I don't know, Steve, if you want to comment on that?
Just to share that Ally completed the process of the second Friday in January count, did email the information to board members. The information is in there for your review. If you have any specific questions, I know she'd be happy to answer them.
I think you're off the hook, Callie.
Take the
Thank you,
chair.
though, for sharing. Any correspondence other than what we've had? So we are down to consent agenda. 2 of them have been taken care of. As you're considering pulling anything out, I want to acknowledge our donations this month. Again, the Mefford family is continuing with their Pride Pump donation of $1,000, and that can be utilized for any student-related expense. And this month, Jessica and Matt Erftring, I always called him Trainer Mad, never heard that last name, but Trainer Matt and his family are donating labor to build and install 3 trophy cases. So I want to thank them for that very generous donation. So, anybody want to pull anything out? If not, I would take a motion to approve it all.
Motion to approve as is.
Second?
Any questions on anything? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Board business? Nothing. So we are ready to set future agendas, or future meetings.
Just a couple things for some future agenda items I'd like to bring back. I'd like to, at a point at a future meeting in the next couple of months, bring in some of our staff to talk about EduClimber, which is a database for our student data. I think it'd be good for us to see how we utilize that. The second thing is I'd like to bring in Jeff Keenis and Tim Shell to talk about middle school scheduling. I think we've talked a little bit about that in a few committees on the side, and I'd just like you to have an idea of kind of some of the things of why we're looking at future changes to how we schedule at the middle school. So those are just 2 information items for future board meetings. But looking at committees, Steve, do you need budget?
Yes, please, if we could get the budget committee to meet prior to the March board meeting.
Okay.
As well as facility committee. I know we're looking for a meeting right around that same time frame. I think it's the week of March 6th, is that correct?
Yep. The week of March 6th. Now, on March 6th, we have a special meeting that night. That's our community engagement meeting that we talked about earlier tonight. So on the 6th, so I'm open to.
Facility, we have on the 8th.
Yes.
Yep, facilities on the 8th at 7:30 a.m., so that one's done.
Can we do it on the 7th?
For budget or for, yep.
Budget?
Does that work?
Does that work for you guys? Or
That doesn't work very well for me. What time? 7:30 again?
you want to do Monday?
I would prefer Monday,
Why don't we just do Monday?
Monday the 6th?
Monday the 6th,
Sure.
So,
7:30 Monday.
If I think policy I'm gonna do at the policy meeting this week, so.
And we need an HR, right?
We all, yeah, the week of March 6th for an HR committee.
And Judy's gonna be gone, is
I'll be
that right?
gone, yeah.
Joan
So,
Bryan.
So we need
So-
somebody who might wanna step into HR, so we could have 3 people, because Judy's gonna be gone.
when do you want that?
If we could avoid Thursday the 9th, that is hard for me because I actually have a Dane County HR and benefits meeting. And so if I could make any other day or any other time of day besides, Thursday morning.
Do you wanna back it up to either the budget meeting or the facilities meeting?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with either of those.
So that would be,
Works for the board members.
Steve, how long are you looking for budget and facilities, hour per hour?
Hour.
So if we did like 8:30 on either the 6th or the 8th? For
Equally good for me, so committee members.
I could do either of those.
Brian, does that work?
Brian, 8:30 either.
Pick a day.
And
Which one would you rather do?
maybe do the Wednesday.
The Wednesday? All right, so HR on the 8th at
On the
8:30.
8th, but, Mark, did you say you would, does that work for you, or?
Sure, what time are you
Katie, 8:30.
8:30 on the 8th.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
So Mark will be stepping in for Judy on the 8th.
Thank you,
for
Mark.
HR.
Cookies.
Okay. Brownies for all of us.
Oh,
because-
all right. Got it, got it.
Anything else at this point?
curriculum meeting? I think we had that scheduled.
We got it scheduled. I think, yeah, Tim just stepped
Yes,
out.
you
And I'll do
Probably-
policy on when we meet this week. So
Do we want to do
DEI,
a co-curricular
Sixth grade is 3:30.
for the 10th
Um,
of April, just to wrap up winter? You don't have to, but
Before
Let's-
Brian
why don't
leaves
we-
us.
we don't have to.
We could do that.
Let's schedule it at the meeting in March.
Okay.
Then we can do it while you're still here.
Yep.
Because I think that would then do it before the April meeting. So that way we clear all the winter sports out. So we'll do that. DEI you wanted as well?
With what we talked about, is it just as well to pause till?
Yeah.
After that.
Schedule it at the March meeting?
Perfect.
Okay, I think we're done. Motion to adjourn.
So
Anybody?
moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.